IO9 presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here are your hosts, John Joseph Adams and David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 40 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hi, I'm John Joseph Adams. I'm the editor of several anthologies such as Wastelands and Brave New Worlds, and I also edit Lightspeed Magazine and Fantasy Magazine.
And I'm David Barr Kirtley. I'm the author of many short stories, including Cats and Victory, about genetically engineered catmen and dogmen battling for control of a post-apocalyptic Earth. The story appeared in Lightspeed Magazine and on the Starship Sofa podcast, and will also be appearing in the upcoming anthology Lightspeed Year 1. And our guest today is Genevieve Valentine. Her short stories have appeared in numerous Best of the Year anthologies, and her first novel, Mechanique, about a post-apocalyptic steampunk circus, was just published by Prime Books. She's also a frequent columnist and reviewer for Lightspeed Magazine and Fantasy Magazine.
All right, well, let's get to our interview.
All right, so we're here with Genevieve Valentine. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Okay, so first of all, tell us about your new novel, Mechanique. What's it about?
Mechanique is about a group of circus performers in a sort of vague post-apocalyptic landscape where things have receded governmentally to a series of walled cities. And basically the only thing that travels now is this circus, which is made up of half-mechanical people, and the force that's keeping them together is very mysterious, even to the people in the circus. And as the war comes closer and closer to affecting them, the circus starts to sort of fall apart. The circus is run by the ringmaster, who is known only as Boss, and she is the person who fits everybody out with what they need. And it differs from person to person, so you have the strong man who has the sort of reinforced skeleton, some of which is external and it's a spine made out of a bunch of junk. And his assistant is actually powered by clockwork lungs that she made him, because when he brought her to him, he was dying. The aerialists all have copper bones put in to make them lighter and more flexible so that if anything happens, they can be reconstructed, which is useful but suitably macabre, I hope.
Okay, so could you tell us about how you developed the idea, and particularly what order did you decide to make it steampunk, post-apocalyptic, and about a circus?
I've been a big fan of Cirque du Soleil since I was like 9, but I'd always been such a fan of the athleticism and the artistry that seems almost impossible. And the more you look into what's required for it, the more you realize it practically is impossible, and the amount of dedication that these athletes have is amazing. And it really was a short jump from thinking of it as that kind of dedication to thinking of it as a supernatural ability. And then from there, I just started free writing, and everything else sort of fell into place as I went along. So I knew that I wanted to have some kind of visible supernatural element, which is where the mechanics came in. And then the rest of it just sort of panned out like a silent movie, and you get the whole picture as I started writing.
And did you know from the outset that it was going to be post-apocalyptic, or is that something that developed kind of as you started writing it?
It's actually something that developed as I started writing it. I figured that a circus like this could only exist in a world where there was nothing else that was traveling this way or as beautiful as this could be, because they'd be run out of town if it was, a suburb full of normal people. And I really wanted to set them apart as much as I possibly could. So I made everyone else as confined as I could, and as trapped not just by the walls of their cities, but by the fact that they have no collective future or collective government to sort of give them a future to look forward to. So this circus sort of falls into their lives and is a life-changing experience in some cases.
So have you been to other circuses besides Cirque du Soleil, and have you done and what kind of research did you do on circuses for the book?
I have. I actually am really into the sort of circus at the local level. My favorite circus in New York is actually a live-in circus at what's called the House of Yes. And they have a bunch of aerialists who basically do in-house shows there all the time. And a friend took me to one of them, and it was an outstanding experience. And I go back all the time, and I actually had my book launch party there. I sort of threw a circus because I loved the performers so much that I wanted to have some part of that attached to the book.
And so, I thought you really did a good job of sort of getting us inside the heads of the acrobats. I guess did you talk to the performers and interview them and stuff to kind of get that sort of insight?
I did actually have a couple of friends who had done gymnastics training, and I looked up so many circus training videos on the internet that you can't even imagine. It always seems to be more psychological than physical. which I guess a lot of Olympic athletes talk about also, where it's about jumping off the trapeze and knowing that the person is going to catch you. And that's something that no matter how many times you practice, it has to be that psychological belief that gets you through it. And if not, things fall apart. And so that was the principle that I took with me into writing the book.
Like, what would you say was one of the most amazing videos you saw in the course of doing that sort of research?
I guess it's a cop-out to say Cirque du Soleil because they have a huge budget. But there is an acrobatic act at the end of Kidam, I think it is, where it's a crew of acrobats on the floor. There's no nets, there's no wires, there's no nothing. And at different points, they manage to toss someone what looks like 20 feet up in the air and then form a stack of 5 people high with absolutely nothing to protect them if somebody falls. And even if you've seen a lot of other circus acts, and I've seen a lot of other more polished circus acts, there's just something about knowing that someone is 5 people high and there's absolutely nothing holding him there except that 4 shaky people underneath him that creeps you out just about the way I want you to be creeped out.
I mean, you talked about the almost sort of superhuman training regimens. I mean, what sort of, like, what's the daily life like in the life of one of these performers?
Part of it would be telling tales out of school, but I do know that one of the people I talked to about her routine pulled up her Google Calendar for me briefly, and everything in it was covered. And I thought that it was a group calendar for a bunch of people. And it turns out it was just her calendar because she spends about 9 or 10 hours a day doing yoga, ballet, Pilates, strength training, and then going to rehearsal. And as someone who can barely walk to the train in the morning, I thought that was pretty impressive.
So other than researching like actual circuses, were there any books or movies or whatnot that were inspiration for you for creating your circus or that served as research?
There are a lot of beautiful circus books, more on the art side than the mechanic side, which I think is equally important when someone is researching a book, not just the mechanics of the age, but getting a feel for how people interpreted the age they were living in. And that usually pertains more to historical novels, I would say. But definitely for something like this, I got several books on the history of Coney Island. There is a beautiful book, an art book by, I think, Caution, called Circus, and it's so heavy that it takes 2 people to lift it, if you're me. I mean, strong people can actually lift it. And it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures and posters and advertisement cards and ticket stubs, and just flipping through it, you realize that the circus was such a transformative experience for people for so many years before we had all the TV type technology.
That actually reminds me, this book has like a circus poster illustration in it and a number of other interior illustrations, which is kind of rare in novels these days, which I think is too bad because I really like that stuff. But could you talk about, how this book came to have those interior illustrations, and were you involved with that at all?
I can, and I was. This is going to be a good story then. I had seen someone's work online. She had done sort of Art Nouveau ink drawing style, and I really, really enjoyed her style. And as I was trying to think about ways to get the word out about the book, I contacted her and asked her if she would be interested in designing a bookmark for me that looked like a ticket to the circus. And we designed the bookmark together, and it looked fantastic. And I sent a copy of it to my publisher, who wrote back and said, is she available for covers and interior art? And the answer was yes. She read the entire book beforehand. She really had a feel for the mood that I wanted to convey. She did fantastic work. The detail is amazing. The one that's used most frequently is the griffin, and it appears on the circus ticket and on the spine of the book and on the interior of the book and at the end of the book. And if I had the guts to get a tattoo, probably on my arm, but I don't, so it's not. It's a beautiful, clear line drawing of a griffin that in the book itself is endowed with a spoilery power, so we're not going to talk about it. But probably my favorite is one that she did of one of the aerialists alone in a tent, swinging back and forth on the trapeze and caught in that moment right before the trapeze swings back. And it was exactly how I had imagined it, and we hadn't talked about it beforehand, and so she sent it as one of the ones for consideration and said, how about this? And I opened it up and just went, yes, this forever.
I mean, you said that the art did a good job of capturing the mood that you were going for. I mean, what kind of mood were you going for with the book?
So for those who haven't seen the cover of the book itself is overlaid a pair of wings, which is an important plot point, and then behind it is a scene of the circus, and there are some paper lanterns and a couple of bear bulbs that are falling apart, and they give off this beautiful light, and then you can sort of see the silhouette of some of the people in the audience, and then after that it's just darkness. It falls quickly into darkness. And I definitely feel like the style of the book, which was not intentional, but by the end was definitely how it had been written, is like passing through a series of lights and everything else is in darkness. And as we go faster and faster, more of it is illuminated. But definitely to start out with, there's the idea of you see this one thing and then everything beyond it is out of your sight in the darkness for now.
I mean, one thing that really sort of struck me about the prose style is that I think this book has more parentheses than any book that I can think of. Is that
ever?
Is that something that you're conscious of? Is that, I mean, do you think more books should have more parentheses, or could you just talk about that?
Yes, I'm active in the parentheses coalition. We would like to see parentheses and semicolons make a comeback. I actually have noticed that the two things that I tend to use on purpose stylistically the most often are parentheses and semicolons. And I'm not necessarily sure why, and sometimes in a story I'll only have one or two, but definitely as soon as I started writing this book, parentheses were everywhere and semicolons were everywhere. And it ended up really working, especially because the book jumps back and forth in time and switches narrators so much that I feel like the parentheses, rather than drawing the reader out of the story, actually helps ground them in what's going on. So occasionally you have a very unreliable narrator who says something, and then the parentheses is the omniscient narrator stepping back in and tying things together and helping you realize that one person had the correct version of events and one person has deluded themselves.
So this is your first novel that's been published, but is it the first one you've written?
It is not the first one I've written. There's a series of trunk novels from when I was 13 that are all terrible. You'll never see those. The novel that I wrote right before this one is actually a secondary world sort of noir murder mystery character study. And after I finished that, I was looking for another project, and I was doing a lot of thinking and researching for the circus book, and I had an opportunity to write it, and I pounced on it.
Could you tell, like, what the books that you wrote when you were 13, were they kind of standard epic fantasy kind of things, or like just what kind of?
No, the first book that I ever wrote was a very dark YA novel about a teenage assassin in a post-apocalyptic city, and names are used as currency, and she is an assassin, but she's the sort that has no money and is purposely being kept in the dark. So she has, I think, a syringe of Drano, because I was hardcore when I was 13. And there's nothing remarkable about it except that my mother found the first couple of chapters, which are just chock full of our 14-year-old protagonist killing people and having sex. And she returned it to me, and she put it on my desk, and she said, I am never going to tell you what you can and can't write, but maybe not this. Okay.
So in addition to these novels, you've published almost 40 short stories in just the past 2 years.
Have I really?
Yeah. So are you really actually just producing stories that quickly, or is these things that like you sort of had written in years ago, and you're just sort of polishing them as you go along, and you're just sort of reaching critical mass with readers and whatnot, or how's that working?
The first story I wrote for publication was in 2007. So I have not been writing for that long. I guess once I started, I just didn't feel like stopping, ever.
So if our listeners want to check out some of your short stories, which ones would you recommend they try out first?
I do think Seeing, one of my stories from Clark's World, is one of my favorite stories, partially because of the week that produced it, which was a week spent in Wyoming learning about astronomy. And for someone who had always wanted to, but felt like she was too science dumb to ever do it, that was a great experience. And the story is basically a love letter to astronomy in general. Thank you, everybody at Launchpad. I had a blast. There's also a Trasalti tie-in story called Study for Solo Piano, which is a story at Fantasy Magazine. And I really love that one. It was a pleasure to write, and it actually was one of the things that sparked the idea that maybe the story of the Circus Trasalti is not over. I also have a story at Strange Horizons called Bespoke, and it is sort of an untraditional take on time travel that I really enjoy because it calls on my background as a complete costume nerd. And I had a story last year that went up at Lightspeed, which is technically science fiction, but also sort of steampunky, called The Zeppelin Conductors Society Annual Gentleman's Ball, which is a very hard title to type and to say. I've never done it right the first time either way. And it sort of examines the underbelly of steampunk, which is that for every brave airship captain, there are probably 8 or 10 people running around on the ship who are considered expendable workers. And the story is from the point of view of one of those workers.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you're sort of a costuming nerd. I was looking at your blog earlier today, and there were all sorts of really detailed analyses of costumes in various period dramas and stuff. Could you just talk about that interest of yours?
When movies do costumes well, it's gorgeous. It's amazing, and you want to sit down and analyze every texture of every fabric that they used, and you want to know the science of the movie making behind it. In the Lord of the Rings trilogy, for example, Christopher Lee, who plays Saruman, has a series of robes that are actually made of heavily textured silk in slightly different colors and finishes that don't register as an actual pattern on the fabric, but something about the way the light hits them gives an impression of depth. And I really like that amount of detail. And when costumes are done well, I really like picking it apart. When movie costumes are terrible, and they are like The Other Boleyn Girl, when everyone is wearing terrible butterick patterns of German court costumes from 20 years before the movie even takes place, it's fun to rip them apart. I think that Tarsem Singh has a really great feel for costume as a shortcut to talking about a character. So in The Fall, every time a character appears, the costume does the work of some characterization also, which I think is one of the main things that a good costume will do. And even when there are historical movies where the costuming is completely inaccurate, they can be beautiful and evocative. And I'm going to call out Elizabeth on this one because there's a series of really iffy historical costumes in there, but it starts when Cate Blanchett as Elizabeth is supposed to be a teenager, and she's wearing these very light fabrics and, sweet flower embroidery and everything else, and by the end she is in the huge Elizabethan silhouette that everyone associates with her, in so many layers that she can hardly move, in the full face of makeup and the pulled back hairline. And the through line of those costumes actually tracks how she becomes the character they mold her into. So even though the first 20 years of her reign are condensed into what looks like 6 months, the costumes are really gorgeous and well thought out, even if they're completely historically inaccurate.
In addition to the fiction, you also write a lot of nonfiction. What are some of your recent articles or reviews that you're particularly fond of?
I have to say I have a soft spot in my heart for either the ones where I've done a bunch of research and it's more or less scientifically accurate, and reviews of truly, truly terrible movies. And I have a sliding scale for that. There are some movies that are considered terrible by almost everyone that I think are actually fantastic, like Earth Girls or Easy, which I'm going to have to actually sit down and write a defense of at some point because so many people hate on it. And I'm like, but it's joyful. But there are a lot of terrible movies coming out now. And there's definitely a joy in sitting down and the lights going down in the theater and you thinking, this is going to be terrible, with a huge smile on your face.
I mean, what are some examples of really bad movies that are nevertheless sort of must-see movies?
Jonah Hex, which I keep telling people, and it seems like an obvious one, but it's really, really hard to find a bad movie that is actually laugh-out-loud funny. A lot of them, like Priest that came out this spring with Paul Bettany in it, are bad in a sort of movie by committee grinding way where occasionally someone really picks up the idea of a trashy movie and runs with it and is great, which in that movie was Carl Urban. But so much of it is, the drag and the annoying, and a couple of people are playing it straight, and you end up watching the movie feeling embarrassed for everyone. But in Jonah Hex, it is so terrible that you figure that everybody was in on the joke, and I laughed for 80 minutes. The movie is really short, by the way. The movie is, I think, 85 minutes or something. The movie is embarrassed to be this movie.
So there were 5 minutes that weren't that funny.
There were 5 minutes that weren't that funny. Credits were involved. Credits aren't funny. But they had me pretty much the moment where Jonah Hex walks up to the disgusting sheriff's office and the grimy sheriff and the dirty deputies, and one deputy goes, "Jonah Hex," and one goes, "Jonah Hex," and the sheriff goes, "Jonah Hex," and it cuts to Jonah Hex, and he goes, in all seriousness, "That's me." And I was like, this movie is going to be amazing.
I think actually one of the most memorable reviews of yours that I read, I just was reading in my blog in my feed reader, and I came across your latest post, and it was when you reviewed Sucker Punch, and I hadn't planned on seeing that. I had heard like a lot of like terrible things about it, but I was like, so let me see what Genevieve thought of it, because I figured that you'd be a good person to give me the lowdown on it. And man, that was a brutal review. Like, I mean, it looked like you had a lot of fun writing that one.
Yes, clearly I thought for several days about the best way to phrase everything. For those listening who are frantically trying to look this up on your feed readers, you're all very sweet. But it was actually a collection of stills from the movie, promotional stills and stills from the trailer that were screen capped of what the women in this movie were wearing. Because, of course, the press had all been emphasizing how much of a feminist anthem this was, and how it was women kicking ass and reclaiming their destinies and everything else. And everywhere you looked, it was fishnet stockings and the bottom of people's asses hanging out of their skirts. Oh, you can't say that. Wait, let me start over.
Sure you can.
Yeah, you can. This is a podcast.
Really?
You can fucking say anything you want.
What? People's asses hanging out of their skirts and high heels, no matter what. There's a shot of Emily Browning in the snow in a cropped sailor's top and the shortest sailor's skirt you've ever seen in your life, and high-heeled boots, standing 2 feet deep in snow waiting to fight ninjas. And you're like, first of all, this movie makes no sense. Second of all, you must be kidding me. And I actually got a lot of blowback on that, because people kept trying to insist to me that it was perfectly possible to be super empowered feminist ladies, even if all you were doing was wearing fishnets and a bikini and mascara that was running from your super empowered tears.
So I also saw on your blog that you've been to some steampunk sort of conventions and things. Just what sort of involvement do you have with the steampunk subculture, and what's kind of your take on that whole phenomena?
I'm actually kind of coming into the steampunk subculture like you get into a cold pool. Like, I put a toe in and it seemed like fun, and then I wrote the book and thought maybe the steampunk community is something I should look into. So I started going to cons. I really have had a blast at steampunk conventions, especially recently as they've started to actively engage with the idea of class and race and imperialism and all of that.
I mean, just how did you get into fantasy and science fiction in the first place, and what were some of the books you read when you were younger that really had a big influence on you?
I think I fell into fantasy and science fiction naturally and just never came out of it. One of the first books that I read on my own, and a book that I read every year probably still, is Peter S. Beagle's The Last Unicorn, which I think is one of the best fantasy books there is. No matter what stage of life you are when you read it, there is definitely something that resonates with you, and it changes as you get older. Carl Sagan's Contact is probably that equivalent for me in science fiction. I had read a lot of science fiction up to that point, but this was the first near-future science fiction where not only did I understand the science, but I was completely invested in what was going on, and I felt like the narrator was, I don't know, I mean, it was Carl Sagan. Like, the narrator was sitting next to you like, you can do it, you can understand everything I'm talking about. And even though I was like 12, I was like, I totally do. And then I looked into it later and was like, I absolutely don't.
And finally, just are there any other recent or upcoming projects that you'd like to mention?
Sort of in the vein of nitpicking movies and TV, I have a book that I co-authored coming out this summer called Geek Wisdom, which was hugely fun and involves picking your favorite nerd quotes of all time and then writing about what makes them so awesome, not just in that context, but in a wider context, which in many cases is great and philosophical and makes you look deeper into the soul of the geek. And in some ways it was just a way to fit Grabthar's Hammer into something that I would actually get published, which was fantastic. And that was edited by Steven Siegel, and it's coming out from Quirk in, I believe, August of this year.
Could you give some example, like what's an example of some of the quotes from the book?
One of my favorite quotes was from Batman Returns, and it was Catwoman's "Life's a bitch, now so am I." Even though it meant trying to talk about the entirety of the female superhero mythos in 150 words, which is no small feat. I don't think I quite succeeded, but it's always fun to talk about Catwoman. Except when she's Halle Berry.
Yeah,
and it's just sad to talk about Catwoman.
Or Anne Hathaway.
I refuse to talk about Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I don't know what Christopher Nolan was thinking. I really thought that he had improved his ability to cast lady people when we got Inception, and it was Ellen Page and Marion Cotillard, both of whom were very good actresses. And then, rather than cast Marion Cotillard as Catwoman, which is what I thought he was going to do, he cast Anne Hathaway, who is an interesting choice. I definitely have some more articles and short stories coming out this summer. Again, you can track everything on my blog at GenevieveValentine.com.
All right, great. Well, Genevieve Valentine, thanks so much for joining us on Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Thank you for having me.
And that was our interview. So thanks again to Genevieve Valentine for joining us on the show. All right, so for our discussion today, we're going to be talking about bad movies.
And Genevieve's going to be so sad that she's not going to be part of this.
I think the first thing to say about that is that there are a lot of bad fantasy and science fiction movies. So obviously, we can't do any kind of comprehensive overview of all of them. If you go on Netflix and you look at, the fantasy and science fiction movies that are available for instant download, there's just so many movies I've never heard of that, look so terrible. And I'm always kind of, puzzled when people say they don't like science fiction, because I just think of all the books I've read. I'm like, wow, there's so many great books. How can people not like this stuff? But then you think, like, most people don't read books. They just go on Netflix and go to this fantasy and science fiction category for instant download and see what's there. And when you look at that, you can sort of understand why people, think of most fantasy and science fiction as being bad,
Well, honestly, anything that I stumble across on Netflix instant download that is a movie that I haven't heard of, that doesn't have any actors in it or any directors or writers that I've ever heard of, involved with it, like, I just assume that that's going to be bad, so, if that's how you're finding stuff, then, you're sort of setting yourself up for failure. But I think when you're talking about bad movies, you kind of have to draw the line somewhere when you're talking about them and saying, okay, well, look, we're going to talk about, like, major releases here, not like every movie that's been made, like, even with a little tiny budget. Some movies with a small budget are really good, like that movie Primer we've talked about on the show before. But most movies that have, like, a very small budget and, they're so-called B movies, they're not really gonna have much of a chance of being good just because there's no money to spend on production value, to spend on good actors, or to even just polish the script.
But so I think I want to start out talking about sort of movies that we've seen in movie theaters. And can you just think of any movies that you're sitting in a theater and they're just so bad that you can't control yourself from just groaning or, making snide comments and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. I've got plenty of those. The first one that comes to mind is Battlefield Earth.
You saw that in a theater?
I did.
Oh, wow.
I was in college and it was like, I was with my friends and we were like, that might be fun, and so we went to see it. But yeah, just one of the, and we saw it like on opening night or something too. So, we wouldn't have heard that it was like one of the worst movies ever made. But, I did see it in the theater, and it was really hard to sit through because I was with people, so I couldn't leave. I would have left. And, we're going to talk about, movies that we've actually walked out on later. But I certainly would have, strongly considered, walking out of that one if I hadn't been with people.
Did you know right off the bat that this was going to be one of the worst movies you'd ever seen, or was it like sort of okay for 20 minutes or something?
I don't remember how quickly it became apparent. As soon as you see John Travolta on screen, it's pretty clear, like what did they do to him? It's like, that's terrible.
And so were you or the people around you, like, actually saying, like, this is, like, turning to people next to you and saying, like, this is terrible and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't recall that happening. Because I hate it when people talk during the movie so much. Like, I'm sort of attuned to not do that. The only time I can really remember doing that was fairly recently. Like, Genevieve Valentine and I actually we went to see Tron Legacy together, and she, I think she can't restrain herself from making comments, and that actually made the movie more enjoyable, I think, because I had her running commentary as we were watching it.
Yeah, no, it drives me crazy when people talk in movies, and we'll talk about that later. But the one time I can think of that I was unable to restrain myself from making a comment during a movie was Steven Spielberg's AI, which, in the grand scheme of things, is probably not that bad of a movie. But there's just something about that movie for me. It's like nails on a chalkboard. I hate it out of all proportion.
Yeah.
And
I'm right there with you, brother.
And so, I don't know, for people who don't know, this is very loosely based on a Brian Aldiss story called Super Toys Last All Summer Long. And the first part of the movie, which is fairly good, basically follows the short story where there's a family, and in the movie their son is in a coma or something, and so they get a little robot kid to be their kid. But then the first kid wakes up, and then the robot, is kind of like he's not wanted anymore. And the story, it's sort of about the wrongness of creating something that's going to love you when you're not capable or prepared to love it back.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is a really interesting theme. But so that's the first part. And then the kid gets sort of dumped by the side of the highway. And then it turns into like Pinocchio with robots. And pretty much nothing from that point on makes any sense. Or, it's like 5 different movies from that point on, each one of which I hate more than the one that preceded it. But the point I finally lost it was the kid ends up, he finds his way back to the scientist who created him and finds out that there's all these other like robot versions of himself in the workshop and stuff. And he says something like, "I feel like my brain is melting." And in that theater, I just burst out. I'm like, "Kid, I know exactly how you feel." And someone behind him was like, "Shh." And that was the only time I've ever had, usually I'm the one shushing other people, but that movie, I just lost it. God, I hate that movie so much.
I really hate it too. And it came out right around the time when I was still sort of new working at the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and so it was like a major release, and so it was something that I went to go see right away because I knew that we would be reviewing it, and I didn't want to have to like read the review without having seen the movie because I was anticipating really liking it because it's like, oh, Stanley Kubrick started it and then Steven Spielberg finished it. That was when I still thought that Steven Spielberg knew how to make movies or knew how to make science fiction. And in retrospect, I see that he's actually he's ruined a lot of science fiction movies. So, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, but after I saw it and I had a similar reaction to you, I was sort of gratified to see Lucius Shepard review it for FNSF and just like completely trash it. And it was like, oh, this was such great fun reading this review. I mean, it was because it was like, yes, exactly that, yes.
I guess you mentioned, that you went to see Battlefield Earth with a bunch of friends who weren't really into science fiction, and certainly, I had that experience when I was in college. I was always dragging my friends, any science fiction movie at all that came out. I'm like, guys, we gotta go see this, and they're like, yeah, whatever. And so I would drag them all out to see it, and the movies are almost always bad. If you're a science fiction fan, you just, particularly back then, you just wanted to see anything. Like science fiction was in such short supply that anything. Like I gotta go see this. But the sort of most disastrous ones, I guess, for doing that was, I dragged my friends out to a bunch of sort of bad science fiction movies all in a row, and then we went and saw Lost in Space, and that was the last straw. Like they're like, no more, you're never taking us to another science fiction movie ever again. Did you see that one? Did you see Lost in Space?
I did see it, but I don't really remember it. Like I didn't remember hating it like you're describing that. It was the last straw for your friends, but. I assume it was just completely forgettable. And
yeah, no, it is. It's really forgettable. Actually, the only thing I remember about it is that it was kind of interesting. It wasn't done well at all, but Gary Oldman gets kind of stung by some weird insect spider, some alien spider or something, and he has a wound that's festering, and he doesn't want to show the other people how bad it's getting. And then they encounter some weird, scary, spidery alien who is somehow him from the future, having been turned into this weird monster by this sting. That's the only, and that was kind of cool. That's literally like the only thing about the entire movie that I remember at this point.
Mm-hmm. This same roommate, my college roommate, and I, we did end up going to see this terrible movie called The Omega Code. You familiar with that?
No, I never heard of that.
Casper Van Dien is in it.
Starship
like
Troopers.
The Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
And we saw like posters for it, and it looked like it was about genetic engineering, and it was like it looked like it was some sort of indie film, but actually it was some sort of religious thing apparently, and it was about like the evils of genetic engineering. Oh God, it's so terrible. and we sort of we knew things got off on the wrong foot, because when we went in the theater, there was hardly anyone there, which wasn't that unusual, but I mean there was just a few people there. But then they started talking to us and they were asking us, so what church do you go to? And I was like, why are they asking us that? And then it soon became clear.
Okay, because the other like really disastrous experience I had like that is my girlfriend in college, was not into fantasy and science fiction at all, and I took her to see Dracula 2000, and and I was like so excited to see it because I don't remember whether Wes Craven, if he produced it or what he did, but somehow they were marketing it heavily as like Wes Craven presents Dracula 2000, and so I was like, guys, this is going to be great. It's like Wes Craven reinvented the slasher film with Scream, and now he's going to do the same thing with Dracula. It's going to be amazing. And this movie is so bad. It's like, it's like, I don't know. It's like a super it looks like a super low budget thing. And there's just like, it's got also, what's her name? 7 of 9.
Oh yeah. Jerry Ryan.
Yeah. And just the whole movie is just so cheesy and so bad. And it has kind of an interesting twist. I mean, the twist makes no sense whatsoever, but, so it turns out at the end that Dracula is Judas Iscariot. And, see, and that's why he doesn't like crosses, right? Because, he remembers, having betrayed Jesus, and the memories are still kind of painful, and I don't know.
Well, we could probably do a whole episode on movies that are ruined by their stupid twists, starting with M. Night Shyamalan.
We could do a whole episode just on like bad movies by M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah. No, he's sort of an example where it's like, I was really excited by The Sixth Sense. I didn't know anything about it going into it, and I saw it, and I thought it was great. And then like immediately right afterward, like I know some people liked Unbreakable, but like I actually hated that. In retrospect, I've sort of gone back and watched it and thought, it's not as bad as I thought it was, but I still don't like it. But then like every other movie, he hasn't made any other good movie ever since then. And some people will say, oh, well, even The Sixth Sense wasn't good, but I haven't gone back and rewatched it admittedly, but it's like he's getting progressively more awful. To the point where like I wouldn't actually even go watch a movie by him. The only reason I saw The Happening is because our friend Chris had insisted it was the worst movie ever made, like hands down worst movie ever made. Like it has no competition. It's worse than everything that we've mentioned already. And it's because it's ironic that the movie's called The Happening, because nothing actually happens in it, right? Were you there when we did the movie night with that?
With The Happening?
Yeah.
No, I've never seen it. No.
Okay. Go ahead.
I haven't seen an M. Night Shyamalan movie since The Village.
Okay.
That was the last straw for me.
Right. And so, a group of our friends, we got together and did like a movie night to watch The Happening, because our friend Chris was just like, oh, you got to see it because it's hilarious, it's so awful, and it's pretty terrible. I have to agree. It's certainly in the running for worst movie ever. But I don't have the experience of having seen it just fresh. I was watching it with my friends who were all laughing at it. So it was a different experience than Chris would have had when he watched it and just thought it was terrible. But yeah, and then like I'm a big fan of the Avatar The Last Airbender, but I can't bring myself to watch the movie. First of all, it got so many terrible reviews, but then also just like Shyamalan's ruined so many other movies, in the last decade that like why would I subject myself to that and like possibly ruin any of my memories of the animated series with his adaptation. So,
and I was never really all that enamored with The Sixth Sense to begin with. I think it's a well done movie, but like everyone was so blown away by the twist ending. And at the time, I was submitting stories to magazines, and so like the guidelines for Weird Tales magazine, one of the things it said is like, do not send us a story where the character turns out to be a ghost at the end. Like, we've seen every possible variation of it. It's so overdone, and they sort of described what it would be like. The character like goes around and it's a little bit dreamlike, and people don't seem to be paying that much attention to him and stuff. And then it turns out he's a ghost at the end. And so, so when I watched The Sixth Sense, I'm like, oh yeah, it was an okay movie, but they just did that ending that's been done a million times before. And so it just never struck me as that amazing.
Right.
But, all right, but so I don't think I've ever actually walked out of a movie in the movie theater that I can think of. But because that's the thing. Like you're always saying that you have sort of a slush pile approach to entertainment, where if something's not working for you, you'll just stop. Because I almost always finish. I almost just sort of out of inertia or whatever. I almost always finish stuff once I start it. I've started more just giving up on things, but still my general pattern is I'll probably watch it. But your general pattern is that you just walk out of things. So, I mean, does that extend also to movies in the theater?
It would, except that, a lot of times I'm with people, and so I'm not going to do it then. Yeah, I mean, the only one that I could actually think of that I walked out of was this movie called Equilibrium. Did you see that?
No.
It's like this. It was like this sort of this post-Matrix movie that was trying to capture the sort of kung fu coolness of the Matrix, and like the stylized kung fu type of thing. And it's just like I found it really obnoxious. And I mean, it has like so much like going for it that would lead me to believe that I would like it. I mean, it's like set in this dystopian future, and it's got all this stylized kung fu stuff. And I mean, it's just like it's just so nonsensical. I remembered when I went to see this movie, I had noted somewhere that the particular theater had a money back policy. So like if you left before halfway through the movie or something, like you could get your money back. So like I mean I was done after 10 or 15 minutes, and I was like, oh, okay, that's it, I'm leaving. I'm not paying for this piece of crap. Like I mean I must have had other things to do or whatever. So I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and suffer through this when it's obviously so terrible. So.
The only thing I can really think of is, my grandmother walked out of Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Really?
That's the closest I've been to walking out of a movie. Yeah, it got to the part where, is it Judge Doom? Is that the guy's name?
Yeah.
He dips the little, like, cute shoe tune and dip, and it, like, screams and evaporates or whatever. And my grandmother was like, I'm not watching this movie. That's a mean thing to do to a cartoon shoe. And
of all things to walk out of a movie for.
Yeah. But like actually Equilibrium, I've never seen that, but I've seen on YouTube I've watched music videos that people have made by taking the action scenes from that movie and setting them to music, and it seems to have actually pretty good action scenes. It's the same thing, like it's the same. I can't think of the guy's name. It's the guy, he developed the gun kata thing. It's like this like made up martial art where you like twist your body around to like statistically dodge where the bullets are going to be. But he also did a movie called Ultraviolet, which I've also never seen, but I've seen music videos that people have made from what seem to be pretty good action scenes. So that's the thing. I mean, usually like these bad movies, like what makes them bad is particularly the dialogue, like the characters in the dialogue, and often the plot doesn't make any sense. But a lot of them have pretty good action scenes, and there's a lot of movies where I wish that you could just go see sort of the 20-minute version, and it would just be the action scenes, and, then you would just go and see it and leave. I really wish there was something like that for Transformers 3.
Yeah.
Because
the Cliff Notes version.
Well, yeah, just like the special effects real version.
Right.
Because, the special effects, Industrial Light and Magic, they do a pretty good job with the special effects, but like Transformers, it's like Transformers 2. I mean, it's just like so. Oh God, it's just so like the dialogue and stuff, and the story is so painful. But I really want to see the special effects. I was watching the trailer for Transformers 3, and there's like the people in the flying squirrel suits jumping out of the plane while the building's falling over, and there's Transformers transforming in the air and stuff. I'm like, man, I would really like to see these action scenes on a big, on like an IMAX screen or something. But there's no way I'm sitting through another one of those, another one of those stories. I just can't do it. I just can't.
Yeah, I was asking people on Twitter what their what they thought the worst science fiction or fantasy movie is, and several people actually did say Transformers or Transformers 2. I've actually never seen Transformers 2 because I hated Transformers 1 so much, but I'm actually not even that enamored with the special effects personally. Like, I mean, yeah, like or the action, because it's just like it's so much going on the screen. Like I honestly, I can't process it. Like I can't follow what's happening. Like, and when the I mean, I think we probably talked about this before, but I mean, like when the Transformers transform, I don't buy it. Like I don't believe that this car is going to transform into that robot. Like it doesn't look like it makes sense, And that's something that, like, I remembered from the cartoons. Like, well, at least they made some effort to make it actually look like this car is turning into this robot, Whereas in the movie, it's just like, that doesn't look anything at all like that's the same, creature or whatever, that same robot. Like, I don't believe it, and so that sort of ruins it for me.
Like what movie have you watched that surprised you the most, how bad it was? Like, you were expecting it to be good, and then you're just like, I can't believe how wrong I was about this movie?
Well, I mean, the Phantom Menace, sort of sticks out. I mean, I guess, if I had been realistic, if I'd been honest with myself, I probably could have anticipated that it wasn't going to be as amazing as I was hoping. But I mean, honestly, that was like, I was so excited for that to come out that, I didn't look at anything. I didn't try to find out anything about the movie. It's like, well, obviously I'm going to go see it as soon as humanly possible. So I don't want to find out anything about it. So, I mean, I went into it completely fresh, but I mean, it's just, and, yeah, I mean, it was so disappointing. I mean, and like right from the get-go, when those Trade Federation guys start babbling their gibberish on screen and they look so stupid, and yeah, I mean, it's just like I had that sinking feeling right away, and never went away.
I mean, like when I went and saw Lost in Space, I mean, back then, I mean, you would just see the trailer and you're like, oh, it's a spaceship, I'll go see that. And now, like, months before the movie even comes out, you basically have a pretty good sense of whether it's going to be any good or not, and like with Rotten Tomatoes and everything. Do you think there's any hope that is going to make movies better? Because I feel like, particularly with science fiction, that for a long time there was this perception on the part of studios that if they just made a science fiction movie, a certain number of people like me would go see it no matter what. And so if they just made it cheaply enough, it was sort of a guaranteed profit. I mean, not like a huge profit, but, enough to make it worth their while. And I wonder now that audiences have so much more access to information about upcoming movies if that's going to change.
I don't foresee it changing, not as long as people keep going to see crap like Transformers 3 and making it one of the biggest movies ever. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, it's so depressing. I mean, yeah, no, I don't see it making much of an impact. I mean, because even when these movies are terrible, people still go see them and they're still profitable. I mean, there are flops now and then, and probably partially due to negative reviews. But I mean, I think even the Shyamalan Avatar, The Last Airbender movie made money, didn't it? Even though like I don't think that there's anyone in the world who thought it was good. I mean, every review I've ever seen of it has been scathing. Including people who love the TV show. So, I don't see that changing.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think Transformers 3 is sort of like an outlier kind of thing. I mean, it's just because it's just such a big event. And just because, I mean, in my opinion, the idea of cars turning into robots and smashing into each other is so innately entertaining that, even Michael Bay can't totally fuck it up. Yeah. I mean, he tries his best, but I mean, because even I hated Transformers 2. I mean, I agree with whoever was saying it. It's like maybe it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, if not the worst movie. But then the trailer for Transformers 3 comes out, and I'm like, oh, I kind of want to go see that, because I want to see the robots, So right, I mean, I think when something's that much of a visual spectacle, I think that kind of all the rules go out the window. But I mean, for sort of, not for like mega blockbuster franchise kind of things like that, but like a sort of more like a, sort of average budget kind of stupid science fiction. Like you were saying, like you go on Netflix and instant download, there's just all these like sort of lowish budget kind of stupid movies. I mean, do you think that those kind of things are still going to keep getting made?
Yeah, I think so. Just because I think that there must be an audience for that. I mean, look what the Sci-Fi Channel airs in their movies of the week and the movies that they just air. I mean, like there seems to be a lot of people who like just like schlocky science fiction movies, and like they don't even care that they're terrible, or maybe they enjoy them because they're terrible. I mean, certainly Genevieve enjoys a lot of movies because they're terrible, but I don't know. Like, I mean, like, my mom watches a lot of these things, and like, she also likes good science fiction movies, and I don't understand how she can watch them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that there must be some sort of business model there that we don't get. Yeah, I don't see that. I don't think that the movies like you're talking about like are made or can be made or broken by reviews at all. Like, I don't think those factor in at all.
Actually, Genevieve was saying, are there any movies like Genevieve was saying that like people generally regard Earth Girls Are Easy as really bad, but she really likes it? Are there movies like that for you where, probably not actually, because you tend to be fairly critical of stuff, but I mean, I don't. Are there any things where they're generally thought to be bad, and you're like, hey, actually, this is better than people give it credit for?
Oh, sure, yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't happen as often for me, I guess, because I am, like you say, I am pretty critical. But I mean, like, there's movies like Starship Troopers that I think that are pretty reviled by most people, but I mean, like, I think it's actually misunderstood, and I mean, I think we've probably talked about it on the show before. It's it's a movie that's not a faithful adaptation of the book, and it actually kind of undermines much of the point of the book. But I mean, I love like the satirical take on it, and I mean, there's a lot of great like fighting alien bug monsters in it, and I mean, there's not enough power armor in it for me. But I mean, I actually enjoyed it, and admittedly, I haven't tried watching it in several years, but. So there's that, I mean, there's a lot of like 80s action movies that most people don't think are good, like, I mean, which also movies we talked about on the show before, but like Predator and like The Running Man, like a lot of people like don't think that those are good movies, but I mean, like, I'll go to the mat for those, like Predator and The Running Man, those are like two of my favorite movies, and like RoboCop, I mean, there's a lot of movies like that I just love, and most people would probably say that they're bad. There's a smaller movie. There was the first Tales from the Crypt movie they did. Tales from the Crypt was this TV show on HBO, and so they did a movie called Tales from the Crypt Demon Night. And I mean, honestly, I love that movie, and like nobody else seems to like it. This was another one that I had suggested for movie night with our friends, and this wasn't like intended to be a bad movie night. This was like, I actually like this movie, and I think you guys will like it, and nobody else seemed to like it, but. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's a B movie, but like, I think it's actually really good. I mean, it's, I think it doesn't have great production values, but I mean, I like the storyline, and I think the characters are really good. I think the performances are really good. So, like, I don't know. I mean, I just really like it, and I'm probably very much in the minority.
Well, like, one thing when I was living in Austin, one thing we did was I had just heard about this movie Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is, sort of notorious as being the worst movie ever made. And so we got it, and so we told my friend, my roommate's brother, that this was generally regarded as a classic. This is like considered one of the best movies ever, and we were just going to see how long it would take him to realize that this is actually really bad, or like whether he would say anything, because this is like a super low budget movie. It's it's like black and white. They're like the UFOs are like paper plates hanging from strings, and like this was Bela Lugosi's last movie, and. He died, like 4 days into shooting or something. And so the director, Ed Wood, he found, it was like his wife's chiropractor or something like that. Sort of looked like Bela Lugosi from the eyebrows up. So he cast him to replace him, and so the guy would just hold a cape over his face for the whole movie. so you couldn't tell it wasn't the same person. I think one science fiction movie I just want to mention that deserves just sort of special condemnation is the iRobot movie with Will Smith.
Oh my God, yes.
I mean, as a movie, it's like taken on its own merits. It's a kind of like it's sort of a sub-average action movie, I guess. But just as a just having taken the name from the Isaac Asimov book, just renders it just one of the most horrific, it's just an atrocity. It's just such a travesty. And I mean that was one where just watching it, it's almost like it's like a parody of like how badly Hollywood handles science fiction properties. It's like. It's like every cliche you could possibly imagine about how to take something, and completely reverse the message and completely just put it through the fucking meat grinder, sausage factory to just turn out this like stupid Hollywood product, no matter what you stick in the top.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, do you know the story behind that? I mean, that movie was actually not based on Asimov at all. Like, it was there was like a script, I think it was called Hardwired, that would sort of been bouncing around Hollywood. And then when the director came on, he started calling it iRobot. And, I guess someone must have said, oh, well, there's this book called that. And then so like they went and acquired the rights to the book, and then they sort of grafted on some Asimov stuff. Like, as I think they grafted on the laws, right? Like the laws of robotics or something.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember the movie really because I hated it as well, and I'm sure I didn't watch the whole thing. But that's why it bears no resemblance to the book iRobot, because it was actually there was an existing screenplay that they just sort of grafted some Isaac Asimov elements onto it, so that they could use it, so that they could call it iRobot. I mean, it's like, really? But yeah, no, actually, now that you mention it, I may have actually walked out of the theater when I saw that. Because I want to say that I did see it in the theater, and I'm sure I've never seen the whole movie, so it's entirely possible I did walk out of that one.
I guess I said that we would come back to the topic of people talking during movies.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really vividly remember the first time that happens, that a movie was just absolutely ruined by someone talking during the movie, is I went to see this movie called FX. And I don't think it's well remembered. It's sort of, from what I remember, it's about these like special effects guys in Hollywood who like go to work with the police and use their special effects knowledge to help out the police or something like that.
Is Brian Dennehy in that?
I don't know. I saw this when I was a real little kid, but there was this kid sitting behind me, and he just talked. He like kids will like just ask question after question after question. He did that through the entire movie, and the part I really remember was that there's a part where there's this guy there's like a serial killer who's murdering women. And so one of the cops dresses up, they use like special effects to make him kind of look like a woman. And then like he's pretending to take a shower, and then, they're expecting the killer to come in and try to, kill the woman, and the cop's going to arrest him. But then the killer like sneaks in some other door and sneaks up behind the guy and like stabs him like 50 times. And this kid behind me is like, "Is he dead?" You're like, "No, kid, he's just fine." And he's just, it's like, and any movie, like, it doesn't matter how good it is. If there's like a kid behind you asking questions through the entire movie, it's totally ruined. And that happened to me. Fortunately, not the first time I saw Lord of the Rings, but I think, or, Fellowship of the Ring. But I think it was the second or third time in the theater I saw it. There was a kid behind me. The whole movie is like, "Is that a troll? Is that a wizard? Is he riding an eagle? Does he have a staff?" Like, seriously, the whole movie. And it just, it ruined, and you turn, like, you're like, "Shh." And the kid will be like quiet for like a minute and then like start up again. and after you shushed somebody like 3 times or something, you're like, "I don't even know what else I can do here,"
Yeah.
Well, that's
yeah. You know what I think that they should do in movie theaters now? It's like, they make a big deal about putting like these slides on the screen that say, silence your cell phones or whatever, and like and the other warnings. It's like, how about you put a number on the screen that I can text while I'm in the theater when somebody's being a jerk, and that it'll send an usher in there to remove their stupid asses. How about that? Make the cell phones work for us instead of against us.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, because the thing is, like, when you're sitting in a theater a lot of times and it's dark and someone's behind you, you can't tell how physically intimidating they might be. Yeah. So like, you're like, "Oh, I just want to tell this guy to shut up," and but like, you're like in your mind, you're like, "Well, what if he's like some like giant like MMA fighter kind of guy, or something?" And so that's a problem, because a lot of times, there's like someone behind you and they're just annoying you so much, and you want to be more aggressive about telling them to shut up, but you're afraid that they might be really big. And then like the lights go up and you see it's just like some little guy. And you're like, "God damn it! If I had known the guy was that small, I would have yelled at him more." Right.
It's really sad that, you have to go through that. And I mean, it's like, that's one of the things that's certainly hurting movie theaters. But, I mean, especially when, I have like a 70-inch TV. So, I mean, like, why am I going to subject myself to that kind of experience when I know if I just, I wait a couple months. I mean, now, movies come out in a couple months, not a year. So, if I just wait a couple months, I can watch it in the comfort of my home and enjoy it probably more. So.
Yeah, like when I was living in Austin, there was a period my friends and I we were really into movies, and we were going to see, I don't know, like 3 movies a week, every week, something like that. And yeah, it just got to the point where like I just had so many bad experiences with people in theater. I just like gave up on, like, seriously, for like a year. I just didn't go to any movies in the theater. Like especially like, I think the last straw is there was somebody brought their baby into the movie theater, and like the baby starts crying, and they get up and go like over, to the door at the front of the theater and just like stand there, and you're like, "No, I can still hear your baby," and then they'll like go out and the baby stops crying. They come in and the baby starts crying again. And it's like, why would you, I don't understand. Why would you bring a little baby like that to the movie?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I remember this really annoying me was when I went to go see a really terrible movie, which I'm kind of surprised we haven't mentioned yet, but Batman and Robin. That was such a terrible movie. I won't say anything about the movie, but yeah, no. So that was a case where I went to go see it with all my friends. I should have walked out of it, but I actually did see the whole thing. But so the whole time when I was watching that movie, there was this little kid who was like sitting right behind me, and he was kicking my seat the whole time. And I asked them a couple times, "Could you stop doing that?" And then at some point, like, I was so pissed. I just like, I stood up and turned around and I said, "Would you please stop kicking the seat?" And the kid's mother was like, "He's only a child." Like, what? Like that excuses it. Like, if I mean, you're his parent. Why are you letting him do this? It's like I asked you like 3 times to, please stop kicking the seat, and then so finally, of course, I got pissed off. I mean, it's just, as if anything could have ruined Batman and Robin more than Batman and Robin itself. But still,
that's a nice thing. At least if it's a kid kicking your seat, they're probably not bigger than you when you turn around.
Yeah, but you never know about his dad.
Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, I have a couple other movies that people on Twitter mentioned. If there's any of these you want to talk about,
yeah, go for it.
So we had a couple mentions of Chronicles of Riddick. That's actually a candidate for a movie where you were asking, like, was there something that I was excited to see that turned out to be just awful? Like Chronicles of Riddick, I was actually excited to see because I thought Pitch Black was actually quite good, and it was sort of like a surprise good movie because it was like sort of an independent, small budget film. And it was like that. I think it was the first thing I ever saw Vin Diesel in, and it turned out like, the movie was actually pretty good. But then like Chronicles of Riddick is just abomination. Like I hate it. I definitely turned that movie off after like 10 or 15 minutes. But yeah, so like other candidates mentioned were Howard the Duck, Aragon, Event Horizon, which we talked about before, and Highlander 2. And actually, Highlander is a really puzzling phenomenon, isn't it? Like, okay, so the first movie came out, and it was like, it was pretty good, I guess. I mean, I haven't seen it in years, and I was never as much of a fan of it as most people are, but, it's like, so there was this movie, it spawned a sequel. The sequel was awful, and yet somehow it got a number of other sequels made and a TV show. How does that happen? And yet, like, something like Firefly, which people, like, just, like, love. There's, like, so many people who just, like, love that, like, nothing else. And yet, like, that can't survive. You know what I mean? Like, how did Highlander ever get all this success?
Well, and I mean, Highlander 2 is so bad, but, and of course I've never watched anything called Highlander ever again after that. But yeah. I've heard that, like, Highlander 3, they just made it, and, like, they just completely pretended Highlander 2 had just never happened. Because, like...
That's a wise move.
Because Highlander 2, I mean, not only was it really horrible, but it completely changed the whole sort of, like, cosmology of the whole series.
Well, because, like, don't they make them aliens or something?
Yeah,
and, like,
yeah.
They weren't supposed to be aliens, but then they were in Highlander 2, I think, right?
Yeah. The movie I've seen in the last, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe the last 5 or 6 years or something, that in the theater that I hated the most was Ghost Rider.
Oh,
oh man.
I never saw it because I heard it was so bad, but I would probably be with you.
Oh, and I mean, most bad movies. I mean, most movies you have like the Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Well, it's pretty easy to write a good Act 1. And it's fairly hard to write a good Act 2, and it's really, really hard to write a good Act 3. And so most bad movies, like, they start going downhill somewhere in Act 2. You start getting the sense like, oh boy, this is going to be bad. And then by the end of the movie, you're just like, holy shit, that was horrible. But even most really bad movies, the first 20 or 30 minutes often is okay. You don't quite get the sense of how bad it's going to be. But Ghost Rider was really noteworthy for just like from the opening shot. I was just like, this is going to be one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I mean, just everything about it was corny, and just sort of melodramatic and just weird. And I guess you can't really talk about bad fantasy and science fiction movies without mentioning Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. Or bad movies in general. I mean, like in the last decade or so, like he just made one disastrous decision after another.
But so in Ghost Rider, I mean, actually, one thing that's kind of funny about Nicolas Cage is I guess he's just a really like exercise fanatic, and so like there's a shirtless shot of him in Ghost Rider, and he's all buff, and the whole audience just bursts out laughing because everyone thinks it's like computer generated muscles or something, and it's like, no, he actually is that muscular, but it just looks, he just doesn't look like he just doesn't look like a person who would be that muscular, and so people just assume it's like a weird special effect when they do that. But yeah, so like I had seen Ghost Rider, and then not too long after that, one came out was it called Next? It was It was supposedly, they claimed it was an adaptation of the Philip K. Dick story, The Golden Man, which is a great short story, so I really wanted to see it because I wanted to see that. But I remember I walked up to the movie theater and there was the poster for it, and I just saw Nicolas Cage's face, and I had been planning to see it, but I was just like, I can't do it. I just can't. I turned around and walked home. Although I did watch it later on DVD, and it has nothing. I mean, it has nothing to do with The Golden Man. That was a complete lie.
Probably the worst movie I can think of in the last several years that I saw in the theater was Doomsday. So I dragged a bunch of my friends to go see this movie, and it's just like, and actually, I might have, I guess I disagree vociferously with some of our colleagues here at IO9 who gave it a very positive review. But yeah, oh god, I hated that movie so much. Just everything about it I hated. And it's by the guy who did Dog Soldiers and The Descent, Neil Marshall. And The Descent was actually really good, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was really looking forward to it. I mean, I didn't care for Dog Soldiers, even though it had been very well regarded, and so I was, I saw that with some interest, but then I didn't get into it. But then I saw The Descent, and The Descent was quite good, and so I was like, oh well, and I was very excited to see this new post-apocalyptic movie, and oh man, I just hated everything about it. I mean, there's just so much about it that's. I mean, I could go on and on. I'll just refrain, but I mean, it's just certainly amongst the worst movies I've seen of all time. But in the last 5 years or so, certainly.
All right. Well, I guess we could probably go on and on with bad movies because, as we said at the top of the show, there are a lot of them. But I think we should probably start wrapping things up. And I don't know if you have any other really bad movies that you want to particularly warn people not to see, or if they're bad movies that are nevertheless sort of worth watching, you should post a comment on this episode. So just go to geeksguideshow.com and find episode 40 with Genevieve Valentine and click on the link to IO9 and post a comment there.
And if you'd like to help spread the word otherwise, if you can go to iTunes and find the Geek's Guide to the Galaxy podcast over there, and you can leave a review or rating over there. How many reviews are we up to now, Dave?
58.
58. We have 58 reviews. So, if you like the show, give us a little 5-star rating there. And, if you like, write a little review. And, help spread the word otherwise.
And as always, we're sponsored by Audible.com. An audiobook that maybe you should check out is, if you like the sort of steampunk kind of thing that Genevieve Valentine was talking about today, you might want to check out the book Bone Shaker by Sherry Priest. We actually interviewed her, I think, back in episode 5. But this sort of a steampunk zombie novel. It's Sherry Priest is called the Queen of Steampunk. It's definitely something you should check out. It's now on audible.com. And so how it works, if you go to our website at geeksguideshow.com and click on any of the ads for Audible, it'll take you to a page where you can sign up for a free trial subscription and get a free audiobook. And that would help us out a lot if you would do that and check out audible.com and Bone Shaker by Sherry Priest.
All right, well, that was our episode. Thanks for listening.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of IO9. For this episode's show notes, to subscribe to this podcast, or for more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your hosts, visit johnjosephadams.com or davidbarkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by Slipgate 9 Entertainment. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.